Hi, my name's Quimmy Wilcox, and I've been working on court reform, family court reform for 18 years, uh, which is, I've looked at all the courts, the different problems, and just globally, and under constitutions and international conventions. Um, anyway, when Prince Andrew and the Virginia Guiffre case came out and accusations against Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell and the trial in New York against her and then the deal with Prince Andrew, which I was, you know, regretted to see him do. Um, I mean, as a mother, she made a mistake, Queen Elizabeth, and as a queen, big mistake there. Um, I'll get into that. So, uh, yeah, it's another suicide. We have 200,000 suicides around the world each year. So this is an example of of how one of them happens, which I hope people will think about in thinking about all of this and all the mudslinging that's been going on. And just, I mean, this is why I'm going to read her memoirs, because these were in court documents. They've been online ever since. I mean, I read them. I couldn't believe um, that Prince Andrew's lawyer and even Ghislaine Maxwell, I mean, it's particularly Prince Andrew, Ghislaine Maxwell needs a psychiatrist. But yeah, I agree with Lady Harvey. She doesn't deserve, and I've always said this, not 60 years, which was originally proposed, nor 20. I mean, this is not that I condone this kind of behavior, but there's got to be some law and order restored. And this was definitely, and also the way that she was treated, the mistreatment of her in New York jail is totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. Guantanamo Bay is totally unacceptable. That's totally unacceptable. I mean, you can have apples and oranges. It's not this. That's something that's very woke. Oh well, it's no big deal compared to. That's another thing. These deportees. Where's everybody been about Guantanamo Bay all of these years? I mean, it just hypocrisy and double standards all over the place. So, I'm, very, very sad with Virginia Giuffre's suicide. I do agree with Lady Harvey, and I think it was horrible that people attacked her freedom of speech, and she was right. Virginia Giuffre's lies caught up to her. She, she had spun her wheels, and this again I'll get into, and this is why I wanted to read the memoirs, and people think about, um, it seems that she was moving forward with her life when I forget if it was the FBI, but they contacted her when she was in Australia, and oh yeah, we're going to go after him now. And she started smelling the money and got involved and caught up in all of that. And there's some missing details of what happened to her marriage. I mean, I don't know, her husband, I don't want the now we got all this money in the mansion, and I want the mansion and the kids. And she was accusing him of being abusive and physically abusive, but there's a restraining order against her. um then there was the this, she's in a hospital after a minor traffic accident, and has 4 days to live, renal failure, and she wants to see her kids. And there's a video on there. I'm sorry. the worst, well, I can't say the worst, but amongst the worst makeup jobs that I've ever seen for, somebody who's trying to look like they've been in an accident or beat up or something. I mean, all you makeup artists in Hollywood, you tell me. You're more of an expert than I am, but excuse me. Um, so, I personally, again, lots of information still is missing. I think, yeah, somehow that greed and that also corrupted it. This is another place where, yeah, she's a victim. She's a victim that doesn't, you know, excuse anything that she does or mean that she didn't make somebody else a victim. But once again, get rid of this. I mean, again, I agree with Lady Harvey. Um, David Boys and his whole law firm, I mean, that's criminal what they're doing. And not the only one in New York. New York and Washington, D.C. are at the lead on all of this. I'm not so sure. Probably Hollywood's in there as well. But I mean, how can you call yourself a democracy? And I mean, this is a farce, absolute farce. No due process. I mean, this is. I mean, as I say, I couldn't believe at the time, and I still am rereading through this, and that's why I'm like, I'm going to read the thing, because how yes, she's a victim. Yes, she was groomed. She was groomed as a child when she was sexually molested from 9 years old to 11. She became a runaway. I think that's how it stopped. It's never been clear exactly. It was a friend of the family. That's all, um, the information that was ever given, who molested her. But it was 9 to 11, and then she, as you'll see, she becomes a runaway, and then with Ron Eppinger, really, this is pimping and street prostitute and human trafficking, and he was arrested by the FBI. Um, so you know, so, okay, so I'll start. So the Billionaire's Playboy Club by Virginia Guiffre. To my true love, Robbie, who believes in me every step of the way, and to all of my children, you are all my very inspiration. Um, it's not clear, it's not dated. So it was an entry and the court case, and it has a 2016 stamp on it. So it's at least, you know, 2016. She may have written this for the FBI when they contacted her. Because she says later that she had the journal, but that she had destroyed it. So chapter 1. Every single person in this shared world together has a unique story of his or her own to tell. This one is mine. It was coming up to my third night camping out at Miami Beach in the summer of 1997. I was 13 years old and hiding from a world full of hurt, sitting on the shoreline for hours watching the sunset fall deeper into the horizon. My eyes were glazed over with tears, not from being wind whipped by the rough sea breeze, but from reflecting on the abuse I encountered as a young girl and how everyone in my life who was supposed to be there for me had now turned their back on me in abandonment. My fears crept up, and the excitement of escaping all of them faded now, realizing how alone I really was now, and for the hunger that was paining my belly. At this point, with nowhere to go and only time to waste, I wiped the tears from my eyes and set out to find an empathetic person that I could manage to get dinner money from. If not, it wouldn't have been the first time I'd gone hungry for the night. I walked to the nearest bus stop and asked a handful of people for any spare change, none of whom that could help me. Sitting down on a nearby curb, disappointed in grief of my current state, I put my head into my knees and began to sob. Out of nowhere, it seemed, a black stretch limousine turned the corner and stopped in front of the curb where I had been hopelessly lost. The back door opened to reveal a heavy weight and balding old man with a big, cheesy smile. Neatly dressed in black trousers and a collared shirt, he was sitting next to a striking young woman, blonde girl, drop dead beautiful, and dressed in a foxy red mini dress. She looked like a model just stepping off a runway. Their smiles greeted me warmly, and he kindly asked, "What is such a sweet little girl like you doing sitting alone on the street looking so upset?" Shocked from this stranger's concern, I was hesitant in telling him the truth. Reluctantly, I decided to tell him that I was a runaway, not from around here, and really hungry. Hoping at most I would get some money for food from him. He instantly displayed a chilling excitement and offered me to come into his car so we could talk some more. That should have been my first cue to get out of there quick. But with nowhere to go and so naive, I didn't realize how much worse it could get. Setting foot into that limo, I made my first entrance into a world that would entrap me for many years to come. He introduced himself immediately as Ron Eppinger, a businessman and owner of a successful modeling agency called Perfect 10, flaunting his oozing wealth by introducing one of his many girlfriends. The beauty next to him was Yana, a supposed model from the Czech Republic who looked like she could be in her early 20s with the heavy load of makeup she was wearing, but really was only in her late teens. She kissed me on both cheeks and said hello in a thick Czech accent, making me feel a little more at ease. Convinced it couldn't be that bad, there was another girl in the car, right? I couldn't be more wrong. What he didn't tell me to begin with was that his modeling agency was only posing for an undercover trade. By the time I found out, I thought it was too late to run. His business was really an illegal immigrant trafficking ring of young women, mostly consisting of underage girls that he was using as escorts to make him uber rich. Only available to selective clientele, costing them anywhere from 1,000 and over per hour of erotic entertainment. The girls were trained to fulfill every sexual desire asked of them, no matter how bizarre the requests might be. The high-paid escorts for Ron's super rich clientele, such as Jana and many other charismatic beauties, would only benefit a fraction of their earnings for themselves. Ron reaping in the majority of the financial rewards and being there were all illegal immigrants. They were further trapped by his enslavement. Yeah, see, this is real human trafficking. Um, I proceeded to introduce myself, besides what he had found out about me on the curbside, telling him my name and a little about how I ended up on the streets, explaining that I could take care of myself and didn't need my family or anyone to look after me anymore. Yeah, right. Looking back later in life, I can now admit I was in a terrible state. But being such a headstrong teenager, I refused to give in. He asked my age, and I told him I was 16 at first. He coyly replied, "Are you sure? I think you could be telling me a fib. How old are you? Really? I won't be mad." Being a terrible liar, I knew had been caught out and couldn't deny it any further. Told him the truth, and he chuckled, then paused and answered in a very serious tone, "As long as you never lie to me again, I will take you in." Right away, I pondered to myself, what did he mean? Take me in. He gave the driver the location of our destination and rolled the middle window back up to then tell me a story of how his daughter had passed away 7 years ago from a horrific car accident in which four other teens were killed, and he has never gotten over it. I reacted with sheer. Now I looked and yeah, he's passed away. He passed away in 2006. He got out of jail or prison 2 years before that, but his daughter had been in an accident when she was 16 and killed. But when I read about how he treated Guiffre, I'm like, oh, was he, you know, molesting his daughter and raping his daughter? Because, I mean, I reacted with sheer, hold on, yeah, I reacted with sheer of life was just mind blowing to even comprehend at first. Okay, this jumps. With such a new outlook of the world to try and grasp at my young age, I was listening to every word spoken to me with such attentiveness. I was going to try and model what I observed from the girls. I justified their way of thinking in my head for now, thinking if all these girls seem happy enough, why couldn't I try to be? It was this or the streets for me. Ron came back for me not long after our conversation got out of hand and took me to a bathroom down the hall. He opened the tap and filled a small plastic cup with water and handed me two small blue oval pills, telling me to take them both as they would help me to relax a little bit more. I swallowed the pills, just following his orders. I put the cup on the counter top and turned back around to face him. Backing me up against the wall and now cornered by this large man, I felt his slithering hands began to creep under my shirt, writhing my skin. I closed my eyes tightly and turned my head away from him, hoping he would take my actions as a sign of being extremely uncomfortable, but that wouldn't bother him at all. He was half enjoying my reaction from the smug look on his face and persisted through it. Considering continuing to undress my clothes, he said he wanted to look me over and clean me up. It was so humiliating having to expose myself to this aging man, and now I knew he was going to end up with his hands and whatever else all over me. All too soon, I hated to be right. As I stood naked before his widening eyes, he told me, you're a hairy bugger. I'll have to shave you right up, young lady." And I didn't know he wasn't just talking about my legs. Standing with my legs wide apart with this man coaxed me through the entire ordeal of shaving. His hands made me feel so dirty. I've lost my mind, I thought to myself, but I had to play nice until I had an opportunity to get away. This was not as fun as the girls made it out to be after all. This was utterly disgusting. I had no idea what was going to happen next with this guy, and due to whatever pharmaceuticals he gave me, I still don't know to this day. Yeah, I mean, she's being raped. She's 13 years old. See, this is long before she met uh Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein. Waking up the next morning, my head was pounding in an agonizing, thumping pain, and I was so thirsty. The satin sheets thankfully covered my body, which was still nude from the night before, and I could hear hushed voices standing over the bed where I was pretending to still be asleep. Listening in on their conversation, I kept my eyes shut. I knew Ron's voice from two of the men, but not recognizing the other guys, I just stayed quiet, hoping they'd soon leave. Ron was telling the other man what atrocities he got up to the night before me, and I heard him say, "Doesn't she look like an angel the way she sleeps? She's my own little angel," he exclaimed proudly. I opened my eyes and rolled over to face them both, having to wrap the sheet over my body, really not knowing what to say except "good morning" in a blushful tone. Ron introduced me to his business partner and told me to go get dressed. He had my whole day planned out for me already. Booked into get my hair colored a much lighter tint of blonde, and afterwards a day of shopping with the girls. I was becoming exactly what he wanted me to, a carbon copy of the teenage Barbie. Only I wasn't plastic and came with many benefits. Days turned into weeks. Um, so I mean, I guess, she could she have gotten away at this point and, sneaked out and left and run away and ended up in the streets? I mean, yeah, this is not, you know, God, nobody should be in particularly not a 13-year-old child. Girl should be in this situation. And we'll see later. I mean, I know this from all of my research. The child protection services, they're worse than many of the homes that these children are running away from. So, this is just, yes, she was a victim and she was re victimized her entire life. Um, Made some bad choices. I mean, you know, and again, doesn't excuse her going and lying and making false allegations against Prince Andrew or, Alan Dershowitz. Well, he's no angel, and I've contacted Alan Dershowitz. He doesn't respond. Um, he wrote Cancel Culture. A lot of his books was Skyhorse Publishing by Tony Lyons. I contacted Tony Lyons about my book. He's the one who raised all the money for Bobby Kennedy's campaign, or a lot of it. Part of that money, the 25 million, came from Tim Mellon, and lo and behold, after the elections, Skyhorse Publishing publishes Tim Lyons' Memoirs. Captain, was it Pan Am Captain? Self-made man, Tim Mellon, with his trust fund. I mean, come on. So Tim Mellon basically paid $25 million to get his memoirs published. And the thing is conspiracy theory. Again, I agree with a lot of things that Lady Harvey has to say. But a lot of this is just, it's a small world, and everybody's in the same bed together and have been for generations. I mean, people think that, particularly just New York. I mean, I'm working in New York, DC, London, Paris, and Madrid, and Bogota, and New Orleans, well, the New Orleans area, Florida, and Tucson, and that's small enough. Just that. Yeah, so like Washington is not, and particularly Washington, New York, everybody in bed together. It's not as big as a world everybody would like to believe. So I guess she could have left, but so days turned into weeks being a servant to the sexual desires of this distorted pervert. I dreamt of escaping, but where would I go and how would I get away from Ron with his controlling my every second of my day? Separating myself from the other girls, being so uncomfortable with enduring the everyday occurrences, I was longing for the solitude of the beach again. They were training me up to be an escort prodigy or something like it. Outrageous orgies were conducted as my lessons, with the girls teaching me all of their tricks in the game. It was all for the sake of men's perverted fantasies. They didn't get anything from being sexually exploited and molesting each other except getting paid for it. Everything from oral sex to penetration with toys. I was expected to not only to join in, but even perform ludicrous acts of hedonism. I was 13. I was 13 years old and had never heard the terminology of these sexual acts before, and definitely shouldn't have been learning them firsthand. I totally agree. Thrown into it, or even, well, maybe by this age, yeah, the kids are talking about what's, this stuff, but definitely not firsthand. Thrown into a world of chaos, I didn't know what to do except be as compliant as possible, even when asked to do the most degrading tasks. And I guess I would even say, yeah, it's normal at this age that these kids are learning, you know, hearing about these sexual acts. And yeah, and if somebody asks you to do that, you say no. Um, the excitement of the lifestyle he offered quickly diminished once I had to pay so dearly for it. The girls that subdued to this lifestyle and enjoyed it definitely put on a good act, but no little girl with hopes and dreams of their untainted future turns to her mother and says, "One day I dream of being a prostitute, passed around from man to man, only to grow older, regretting so much of my life." I have to agree. Yeah. It was all a part of an illusion that Ron painted for us that made it seem so alluring in the first place. Spending my days with Ron, he took advantage of every chance given, even in his convertible with the top down. I would be forced to go topless while he drove around. When I asked him why one day, it was so supposedly so I could maintain an even suntan. But I knew it was his way of showing off his treasure. I was a far cry from the simple country life I had been raised in, wearing designer mini skirts and tops that always revealed too much. Of course, due to Ron and the girls determining everything I wore, ate, or spoke, we would spend our days at hair laser clinics, shopping, tanning beds, and eating as little as possible. Through the nights, we were expected to become party animals and greet Ron's clients with the utmost flirtatious attention and doting as possible. Then, whether we were out for dinner, at a party, or at a club, the men would choose his girl and take her home. Every girl had a different price, and so did the charges, depending on the various clientele. But Ron always kept me for himself. She, somehow thought she was special. And you know, I mean, in that world, I guess she was. Otherwise, she would have been passed around as well. Um, yeah, and also this is Miami. This must have been the 80s or 90s. I guess. Wait a sec. Yeah, she was 40, so it must have been 90s. I mean, okay, so this is, after the cocaine. What was that cocaine? What was that? The woman. It was Catherine Zeta-Jones who played her. Um, and she was a drug cartel, uh, drug trade, and yeah, I mean, my God, DC in well, I guess it was the 80s, but I think it started in the 70s, with all the cocaine and shooting and really dangerous, but and I mean Miami lawlessness and this kind of stuff was going on all the time. It still is. I just saw an article. Um, so sympathy and gave him my pity, believing this man had a heart. His next proposal was eerie. He said, "If you wanted, I could be your new daddy, someone to take care of you, and you'll be my new baby forever." He stroked my hair, such as a caring parent would comfort a scared child. See, this also makes me question whether he had been sexually molesting his daughter. Um, a part of me, and I assume that when she was killed in the accident with the other people in the car, that it was a drunk driving. That's another, yeah, too many of those in Miami. I mean, everywhere, but yeah. Uh, a part of me wanted to accept his words and believe he really could feel that way. And then I also considered how hard it was living on the streets. In the end, I convinced myself this would be the lesser of two evils. I mean, she has a point, because believe me, I mean, my ex told me, promised me, you'll end up living on the streets if you ever left me. I was like, you've got to be crazy with the resume that I have and the experience. That was crazy. My Lord, it's been 18 years and I've barely been able to keep a roof over my head. I mean, and this is discrimination all over the place. I have, lawsuits all over the place under discrimination, but I can't find a lawyer to help me. I've been canceled. And I represent price, white privilege. So I don't know. Hopefully now with the Trump, I mean, I'm crossing my fingers. Um, so yeah, she has a point. Lesser of the two evils. The car stopped plaza, at a plaza on the water, surrounded by little boutique shops, restaurants, and little stalls with items for sale, like sunglasses and costume jewelry. I didn't know what to say or do or how to act. It all happened so fast, I just went along with everything he said for now. We went to a takeout restaurant and ate on the water side, and afterwards he took me to the Gap Kids company to dress me in his idea of proper attire. Tiny Gap Kids. Okay, tiny cutoffs, shorts revealing the cusp of my buttocks, and some shirts that barely fit. Even the sales assistant was shocked at what she thought was my grandfather's choice of clothing. I couldn't even believe it myself only an hour ago. I was begging for money, living on the streets, and now I was dining al fresco and shopping at a name brand outlet. We then hit a couple of more specialty stores afterwards. He said he had to buy me a few more necessities to start with lacy G strings and what looked to me like lingerie pieces I had only seen grown women wearing in magazine ads or movies was now a part of my wardrobe. In my mind, it was a big step up from being a little girl any longer. The driver took us back to Ron's grand apartment overlooking the Isle of Key Biscayne, and a large bridge leading to a Miami harbor entering his residence. I was blown away by the spectacular view. Rich decor and white marble floors that were so glossy it looked as if I was stepping on glass. He took my shopping bag to a larger room in the back of the apartment and put them into a small closet. The room was considerably larger with glass exterior walls that maximized the potential of the panorama landscape, soaking in the seascape of Miami. In the room was a gigantic round bed, raised off the floor by 3 steps and a mirror on the ceiling. It looked like a honeymoon suite out of a raunchy hotel. He then exclaimed, "This is my room here, and you will be sharing it with me." When I asked him where I would sleep, he then sickly replied, "With me, silly. Where else, of course?" With no room for argument, I pretended this to be okay, with everything that my common sense was screaming out in my head to run. Yeah, sometimes these sentences are not terribly clear. Next, I was taken down a long hall at the other end of the apartment to meet 5 more exotic beauties. 3 girls were in their late teens, and the other 2 were in their early 20s. All of them were from the Czech, here under false passports provided by Ron and his contacts. Jana held my hand while introducing me to the group of girls as Baby, a pet. Oh yeah, this kind of jumped around. That's what I couldn't understand. Yeah, the story does, because you had page 5, 6, then that was followed by 3, and now we're at 4. So that's why, yeah, so there's a jumping around here. So here, let's see. A shocking first impression, the girls were completely nude, revealing their voluptuous young bodies with such a careless ease, and others were in just a G-string, similar to the ones Ron had bought me earlier. So yeah, okay, we'll pass through that because it is. So yeah, she gets raped. Then here it picks up at page 7. Let's see. I would always dread the end of every night, fearing that new desires he had in store for the evening. Sometimes he would hurt me and tell me to try and enjoy it, then do it over and over again until I gave him exactly what he wanted. I always resisted until I could no more. He was too overpowering and relentless at getting the results he wanted. Yeah, I mean, she was being groomed and 13 years old. At other times, he could be so gentle and caress my skin, worshiping every inch of my body, all relying on what mood he was in. Yeah, I mean, this is also a typical tactic. Um, Stockholm syndrome. Often, though, he liked to play the teacher role and instruct me on every motion and explain what would happen when I did those certain things to him. No matter what he did to me, I was only disgusted with myself more and more. I still shudder at the thought and how he used my body. I turned 14 in August that same year and was spending my birthday loaded on a concoction of pharmaceutical and alcohol, being generously supplied by the very man who swore his devotion to caring for my every need. I didn't even know myself any longer, completely shying away from the girl I'd grown up to be until this point. The apartment was empty except for me for the time being, and that was God's own little present for me. Some solitude. For once, I thought. Pouring myself another drink, I opened the sliding glass doors to the balcony and walked to the edge. Looking down from the many stories where Ron's apartment was, I wished myself a happy birthday out loud and wondered if my family even remembered the day's occurrence. Dwelling, dwelling in my sadness for the 14 years of suffering and loneliness I had already endured. The tears swelled up in my eyes, trickling downwards, making my eyeliner inevitably leak down my cheeks. Okay, sadness for the 14 years of suffering and loneliness I had already endured. So I guess, there were problems in her family, in the home from the beginning, um, and not just the sexual molestation from 9 on. I mean, later on, I guess that's possible with some of the reactions of her mother. Um, I felt so trapped and began to entertain the thought of jumping over the edge. It all seemed much easier, and the simple blackness that death had to offer, rather than the tangled mess I was so tired of fighting to get out of, seemed a much easier approach. Detached from wanting to feel anything, I became so numb towards my life's own tragedies, I couldn't live like this any longer. I lifted my bare legs over the edge of the railing and sat looking at the ground beneath me, so close to even just slipping off the edge to my very death. I couldn't think of any reason not to fall. I thought I had made too many bad decisions to keep going on, but some force of a higher nature had other things in store for me. The sliding door slammed open with a burst of speed, and Ron scooped me up in his big arms and brought me inside to our bedroom. Laying me down and seeing the look of despair in my eyes from my tear-stained face, he went into the bathroom cupboard and returned with 3 pink pills. Forcing me to swallow them, using the angered tone of his voice, he thought he was turning my sorrows into a distant dream as I passed out in his tight clutches, crying myself all the way to sleep. He didn't even ask me what was wrong, probably because he already knew. Yeah. Soon enough, the crumbling of his evil empire in the underworld of selling sex for his own advantage began with a single crack in his perfect scheme. And proudly, it all started with me. Ron got a scare one day and rampaged through his apartment, telling us girls to only pack our important belongings and some clothes, as we were to leave right away. I didn't have much belongings to me, so I basically sat there watching everyone rush around frantically and was curious what could have gotten a man like Ron so scared. Once we were packed up and in the limo, he was trying to calm the frantic girls down after all the panic that spread through the apartment like wildfire. I was the only one sitting there, half amused at the entire situation. He began by assuring us that everything was going to be fine. Calmly, he continued to tell all of us, packed in tightly, even for a limo, that we were all taking a long trip to Florida's countryside because someone had reported an anonymous tip to the missing persons unit at the local police station, identifying a very young girl as a possible victim of abuse living at his apartment. Ron knew what a landmine of trouble he had brought upon himself, making an exhibition of me on the streets of Miami. I didn't pull off the older look like the other girls. I actually looked younger than my age, with my blue eyes and freckles always giving the impression of my youthful innocence. Now he just had to do whatever it took to ensure he stayed as far away from the authorities as possible. Arriving at a ranch in Central Florida many hours later, and I assume it belonged to Ron, knowing never to ask him things like that. I knew my purpose, and it wasn't prying into his personal life outside of the bedroom. There was a main house, a few cottages, some staff quarters, and a paddock where the horses were kept. I was in heaven, I thought at first. Finally, something I could really enjoy. Riding was always my passion, basically growing up on the backs of horses since I was just able to walk. Not surprising, I began to despise Ron and all of the girls for the gross exploits they made me do with them. Beginning to isolate myself from everyone, I'd rather spend my time sitting under a tree watching the horse graze, writing in my journal, or painting, but mostly avoiding everyone possible unless Ron required me elsewhere. Nighttime was always a reoccurring nightmare for me, relived over and over again in many various ways. Ron would always start by making me some drinks and offering an assortment of pills before indulging himself by grotesquely putting his genitals in my mouth and tell me how to give him what he would call a first class blowjob. And I was being judged every minute of it, ordering me to slow down or speed up or maintain a perfect rhythm. I was constantly being criticized for my efforts in pleasing him. I was eager when he actually gave me a compliment. The rest of the evening was always a surprise left up to a moment's notice. Quite regularly, he would proceed with having the girls dress me up in some sexy outfit and loads of makeup, then entertain him with a lesbian reenactment revolving him in the center. Yes, again, she was being groomed at, well, now she's 14, just turned 14. Sometimes they would use dildos and other foreign sex toys. Ron liked to see us hurt during sex, sometimes even penetrating me anally, but I was always resisted and would try to redirect him with another sexual desire of his, but I had no excuses when it came to me having to use the sex toys on him. He told me how men have G spots in their rectum and instructed me on how to precisely penetrate him. These nights went on what seemed like an eternal sentence for the price of not living on the streets, when unfortunately for the ones still there, I feared and knew from my own personal experience could be much worse. Yeah, unfortunately, she is correct. Needing some contacts with someone of my adolescent mentality, I called one of my school friends from the past, whom I won't name out of privacy, but I'll call him TJ. We were so close, and I knew very well, so well, I had memorized his number a long time before. He was my first puppy love, sprung from a childhood friendship. Being my very first crush the summer before all of this happened, he was the only person I could think of that would care enough to talk to me. So, I mean, I'm not sure if she, Ron, she was raped by Ron, if that was the first time she actually, because if she was sexually molested, maybe she was touched, but never actually raped. I mean, that's never been really clear. And what her relationship had been, if it had been more than just a friend, or a boyfriend. And how far did that go? I mean, she talks about puppy love. So that's all not very clear. Let's see. In the middle of the day, the least busy time to be noticed, I snuck into one of the vacant guest rooms and used the phone to call my good friend. The sound of my voice radiated a chill in him. It's you. Oh my God, Jenna. Are you okay? He was so shocked to hear from me and the sheer fact I was still alive. Nearly 3 months now without a single word to my family or friends. Everyone doubted my return. My attempt to forge a happy voice when I spoke to him failed, and I absolutely crumbled when he was at a loss for kind words for me. I told him of my current state of affairs, telling him of Ron and how I was terrified of him. Trying to escape in the middle of nowhere was useless. It was like being kept in a cage that I was unable to break free from. Going on to dump my issues on TJ, I proceeded with how I longed to call my family and to be with them for good, but was too afraid they didn't want me, knowing I'd just be sent away somewhere else again. And to me, after all, this time was like going from one cage to another. So see, she had been sent away. Um, and later it seems she'd been sent away at 11. And I think there had been a time where she'd gone to live with her aunt. I thought that was in Colorado. Um, but her aunt couldn't handle her. I mean, this is, it becomes very complicated because one of the things that children who are sexually molested, they become very good liars. And even this is where we see schizophrenia. I mean, it depends on how severe the sexual molestation was and what age it begins. Um, there's different factors, but this is where you see a lot of schizophrenia. And, you know, there's this pathological lying because they can't face reality, so they produce a reality that they can live with. Unfortunately, that's become of epidemic proportions amongst everybody, even though but yes, this is definitely I mean, it's clinically shown, and this is where it's just absolutely unacceptable that the psychiatric industry, they again, it's just making money off of all of these, and they're re-victimizing these kids. I mean, I hear some of these advertisements on, it's no longer TV, on YouTube or whatever I'm listening to, Amazon. And I mean, I'm fit to be tied about, these kids, how halfway houses and we take care of these kids, and the woke rhetoric that's going on there. I'm just like, my Lord, these kids, they're not being helped by this system anywhere. Anywhere. They're being re-victimized and re-victimized. And this has just gotta stop. So he had been called by them numerously and promised me that they were very worried and even hired private investigators to try and find me. Given I was 11 years old the first time I was sent away, my trust in their sincerity he spoke about was seriously doubted. So I don't know if the private investigator stuff was made up or not. I kept the conversation short just in case my absence was being noticed, and I left on the note that I would speak to him again shortly. His attempts to get off the phone were nothing short of desperate plea to keep me on as long as possible. I thought he was just trying to help in some way, giving him assurance in the fact I had survived this long. Obviously, I can hold off a while longer. I gave him my love and told him I'd be in touch. Thinking I had slipped away unnoticed, I entered into the room that I shared with Ron, hoping I got away with my brief and very needed phone call. The place looked empty and everyone else seemed to be out and about, so I decided to have a bath in the spa and try to relax before the night's precautions. What? My body glided into the steamy water as I began to think about TJ and how good it felt just to hear from a friendly voice. My thoughts drifted into the days I missed when I felt I could be silly and childlike, and I nearly forgot for a moment how grown up I was acting these days. My first glimpse at the image surrounding me when I resurfaced above the water was daunting. There was Ron standing over my tub, looking down at me with an eager display of his arousal. He began to undo his pants and take them down when he told me, "Put your lips on my cock." I was too slow in responding to his request, so he grabbed me by the back of the head and forced me into his groin. I had tears streaming down my face as I looked up to him with the saddest blue eyes, hoping he would take pity and stop, but he never did. I was really hurt by his aggression, and he definitely knew it this time, which I believe only made him more heated. I closed my eyes and began to count, using the time to keep my thoughts elsewhere, believing every number I counted only furthered me to the end of this. I just got over 100 when he finally exploded in fulfillment, still half submerged in the deep bath. I was struggling to gain my bearing, and as Ron was picked me up out of the bath and carried me to go to the bedroom. Okay. It was definitely needed an editing job, which was just outside the French adjoined doors. Still damp from the hot water in the spa, I had goosebumps from the chill of the fresh air where he brought me to the bed and proceeded to deeply violate my every being. Eventually, his scars that he left were too deep ever to be healed and would even carry on through the years to come. Upon his bursting with pleasure for the second time, he just got up and left without even saying a word to me. Left alone, I was awake for hours after that. There was no escaping the pain that night. I lay naked, wrapped in the sheets, sobbing in the darkness. My feelings of being hurt and disgusted after his abusive ordeal. When will it ever stop? I prayed to God and begged for death rather than face another day in my life. I woke up still alone the next day and exasperated from misery I felt the night before. Ushering through my drawers to find something to throw on, I could care less what lay in store for me today. It couldn't be as bad as being raped by a scary man repeatedly. Yeah, I mean, very sad. And just what's so sad is this goes on all the time, and it continues to go on all of the time. Starting my day with a few of the supplied oxytocins and a Bloody Mary made by the live-in house chef. See, also, what about all the personnel that are working in all of these places and seeing all of this stuff going on. I mean, there is liability there. Having 2 celery sticks for my breakfast, I wanted to lie out on the pool and forget the world. Ron hated tan lines. So to be caught with a bikini top on was a big no-no in his rule book. But after my cries to stop were so blatantly ignored last night, I was out to piss him off. So I didn't remove my shirt. I put on my headphones, and before I knew it, had fallen into a deep slumber from my self-made therapeutic cocktail, the only way I knew to cope with the emotional turmoil on the inside. Yeah, at 14 years old, I mean, you know, on a way alcoholic. I mean, but can you really believe the girl? I mean, yeah. Desperate to hear his voice, I called my friend TJ a few more times that week. I needed to feel like someone out there really knew me. Sometimes we would just chat like old friends with no care in the world and laugh at a distant memory from too long ago. Then would come the goodbye part of the conversation, and we would both get teary-eyed, not knowing what could happen next, or if this would even be the last time we ever spoke to each other. My biggest fear came to reality was when I was in our bedroom one afternoon, just lounging around out of boredom. Ron came bursting in through the door, red as a tomato. I couldn't help but feeling I was in big trouble. His face was distorted and raging towards me. I knew right away he must have found out that I was calling TJ, but how? I had no idea. I had always tried to be as invisible as possible. Soon enough, it was all, well, it was all explained. Are you trying to get me caught? You are nothing but a stupid girl. You know that? What am I supposed to do with you now? He was tearing up the room while his rants gave me something else to think about. What would he do with me if he had no use for me any longer? I wasn't even thinking about him being caught for soliciting illegal immigrants for the purpose of prostitution. I was more worried that he would be upset at the fact I was talking to another guy, maybe even jealous that he was at least my age. I replied with simple sentences that I could manage to get out between all of the shouting. I kept saying, I'm sorry, putting my head down in shame. He picked me up by my throat, pinning me against the wall. You are going away, far away from me, and you better be nicer to the next man I send you to. I've heard he's not a nice, he's not a nice as most would like. Are you fucking hearing me, bitch? I slid down the wall, choking on the first air entering my lungs, breathless and terrified. I never thought Ron was a nice guy, but I had never seen him lose it this bad. Now I was being sent away to another stranger, another man. It only terrified me more. Now I'm asking myself, this guy got out in 2004? How many years did he serve? I have to check because Ghislaine Maxwell is 20 years. I mean, so the girls came in to say their goodbyes. All of them were crying and asking me in their best English languages why I had to call someone and lose everything. I was able to find out through the broken sobs off of, I mean, this is, girls are also not, I mean, okay, let's see what kind of family and background they've been coming from. They, these Czech girls. Then that the confession came from the housekeeper, who said she saw me use the room regularly, but was never messed up. So Ron looked at the recent telephone bills and found the same number dialed from that room consecutively. He knew it was me right away. At least he didn't know it was another guy, I thought to myself, or I probably wouldn't have made it out of there alive. Ron came back to usher the girls out of my room and told me I had 5 minutes to pack my clothes, which he made clear were to be my only belongings to take with me. He washed his hands clean of me that night, or so he thought. The driver came knocking at my door just as Ron said no longer than the 5 minutes that he had offered me, and he took my single bag to the car. I didn't want all the jewelry, music, or books that he so caringly bought me as tokens of his twisted affection. Only taking my clothes and a wad of $100 bills I had been saving, I slit a hole in my scrunchie, inserting my cash for a rainy day that I was more than sure was just around the corner. We drove for hours until I started seeing familiar surroundings. I couldn't believe my own eyes. I was back in Miami, but not on the beaches, somewhere in the CBD this time. The driver delivered me to the front door with my one bag and waited at the door with me. Now I knew how it felt to be a puppy, picked from her litter, as you can only hope your next owner would treat you with some sort of kindness. Another balding man answered the door, but he wasn't so grotesquely fat like Ron, but still a new owner at that. He looked me up and down and seemed amused as he snickered to himself. With one last look to this driver over my shoulder, it was almost an appeal to him for some way to help me. I knew he couldn't. I knew he couldn't anyways. I was just hoping. He told me his name was Charlie, but didn't even bother in asking me for mine. I was sure Ron already filled in all of my details when he arranged this. Charlie picked up my bags and led me into his bachelor pad townhouse. I was never given a welcoming tour of my new residence or made to feel comfortable. He walked me up the stairs and opened one of the doors in the small hallway, telling me this would be my room. He showed me into it and told me to wait. He would be back shortly. I sat on my bed, afraid to touch anything, and after the warning Ron gave me, I knew I had to watch my step around here. I put my head down onto the pillows, my where world was falling apart, and let my emotions downpour. Exhausted from the day's emotional turmoil, I ended up falling asleep. I don't even know if he ever came in at all that night. The next morning, I looked out of the window to see my new surroundings. It was a beautiful sunny day outside, unlike the dreary cell I was locked away inside of. Feeling the sun warm up my face through the glass, it radiated a familiar sense of comfort from the days of the good parts of my childhood. I reminisced how it had been used to be before, how it used to be before all my life turned upside down, before all of the fights with my family, before I had to look after myself, and before I was a slave to men. These days were too long gone now, with too many hard times passing me by. It seemed surreal to think that life had ever even existed in the first place. With that, thought I shook myself out of reminiscing that way. Whatever was going to happen was out of my control now. I just had to give myself some hope that I would have the strength to get myself out of these circumstances before anything really bad happened. Yeah, I mean, yes, she was trafficked. And this is also what I don't understand with Andrew Brettler. I haven't seen, I wasn't at the well, with Prince Andrew, it wouldn't have been trials, but in negotiations or any of the court documents or anything. But you know, this, I mean, well, wait a second. You know, you because a lot of times some of the descriptions that she's talking about, for example, the sweaty man with Prince Andrew, and Prince Andrew saying he doesn't sweat, and Lady Harvey confirmed that. She said also he doesn't drink. And so a lot of the descriptions that she's giving are actually descriptions of, her experience with this Ron or Charlie guy, as we'll see with Charlie. Um, so, and that can happen as well. I mean, I think this is more her being victimized by David Boies and the lawyers and coaching her and grooming her with all of this rhetoric and preparing her for the case. So that also, would confuse her and convolute the issues. Um, so I mean, again, she was exploited again by the New York lawyers. Um, you know, if they hadn't gone back into her life and brought all of that up, maybe her marriage, yeah, they wouldn't have had millions of dollars, but maybe they just, you know, a calm life together, or relatively, and not with her in suicide and just drama. I mean, it really, there's a lot of questions of what was happening at the end. But definitely she was losing it. Uh, so could that have ended differently? Chapter 2. The house was quiet, so I just assumed Charlie was still asleep. I decided to get cleaned up and have a shower. Not even a knock on the door when Charlie walked in with ease. Typical, I thought. It was an easy way for Charlie to break the ice. You really are as beautiful as Ron said, as he opened up the curtain, watching me rinse myself in the shower and knowing I had no way out of this except to go along with whatever he wanted. I just looked down at the mention of Ron's name, wondering what else he had told Charlie about me, realizing later that he wouldn't have said anything anyway. In fear, I would have been a damaged product that wouldn't make him the money that young girls go for. He just sat on the side of the vanity top and continued to take observation of me standing submerged under the falling water. I avoided looking at him and let him do all the talking. After all, I knew what I had to say was of no importance. That is, if he was anything like Ron. Between the water beating down over my head, I could slightly hear him rambling on about some club and restaurant he owned in Fort Lauderdale. He said he was going to take me shopping for some club outfits and we would party together tonight, as if I was supposed to be excited over this so-called treat of his. I looked up and gave him a quick smile, adding a compliant nod, and turned my attention to turning off the faucet and quickly grabbing my towel. I was falling so far from who I used to be, shying away from my outgoing personality to a quiet girl that didn't even recognize herself in the mirror anymore. I dried myself off and looked at the man standing between the doorway and me. He was still watching me with a sleazy look on his face, but now proceeded to move in my direction. Arms wide open, he embraced me, running his hands up and down my youthful curves, licking my neck and earlobes. Then his large, rough hands cupped my small breasts and continued downwards to feel in between my legs. I knew I had to get this over and done with as quickly as possible, but I was dreading this moment from the second he greeted me at the door last night. I fell to my knees and gave in to his demented perversions. Thankfully, it didn't last long, and before he climaxed and I was allowed to get myself dressed and ready to go out, I was nothing but money well spent in his mind. This was another extremely wealthy man with a completely new set of wants and needs, asking a 14-year-old girl to affectionately dote on sexual desires to a man in his mid-40s. I really hated myself. These men and just about everything my life had boiled up to by this point. But I knew from a young age that to survive in this harsh world, I would have to do many things I would not willingly choose to do. At the shops, he decided he would choose the clothes he paid for, which I might as well have been declared a teenage prostitute. Yes, this could use some editing. Just like Ron, he also liked it that way. The more degrading he was to me only proved his ownership of my body. He bought me tiny cocktail dresses and skimpy outfits, which I thought closely resembled the lingerie he'd also bought me to wear for him. I noticed that day that he enjoyed parading me around the shopping mall and out for lunch at Hooters, even joking with the waitress that he'd like to buy her uniform because he thought it looked sexy on his new girlfriend. This is also, what society accepts. I mean, okay, Hooters, not exactly the best example of references of a society, but yeah. We arrived at his two-in-one restaurant and club. I wonder what that one is. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, it was a revolving tower called Hot Chocolates in downtown Fort Lauderdale. The food was delicious, and for the first time since being with Ron, I ordered a hefty meal with steak and mashed potatoes with a scrumptious gravy smothered on top. Charlie ordered strong cocktails for us both, and before I knew it, my head was spinning and we were on the dance floor together. The music blared in my head and the rhythm of my body took over, completely forgetting about even dancing with Charlie and letting the music take a hold and work its magic. It didn't do me any justice, though, as Charlie watched me imagining what pleasure lay in store for him later on. Taking me home before the club had even closed, he just couldn't wait to indulge on exactly what he was fantasizing from beforehand. Once back at his townhouse, he led me up the stairs into his bedroom and pushed me down on the middle of his bed. The motions from the wavy mattress made me dizzy and even feel drunker when he laid on top of me. Coming at me like a hungered beast wanting to ravage his next meal, it was intimidating as he entered into me with a forceful thrust. He moaned out in delectable heaves. I looked away while he self-indulged his own gratifying needs, using my body as an instrument in pleasure. I only grew stronger in my head, letting the hatred for men desires intensify. The next 2 weeks, I was expected to be at Charlie's beck and call, never allowed to leave his side, even making me sleep in his bed from the second night onward. I never even got the chance to call TJ again. It was too much of a risk anyways, thus pushing him further out of my memory, too afraid of the emotional repercussions. Our typical routine was to wake up, get showered and dressed, and I would put on my makeup while Charlie made his business calls for the day. We would leave the house mid-afternoon and run his errands, do some shopping, sometimes meeting his friends or business partners for lunch. None of the men he introduced me to seemed offended at his choice of adolescent eye candy. They just continued to chat away as if it was normal to be in public with his arm draped over a girl young enough to be his granddaughter, not too shy by giving me a flirty tap on my bottom or even tried to kiss me. Yeah, again, I mean, society is accepting this, and yeah, Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, this is just par for the course. My last night was no different from every other night. We went shopping that day and out for lunch alone. Later, we headed to a club his friend just launched, and it was, see, the club scene, the restaurant scene, and it was his grand opening that night. The club was called Iguana Joe's. We met up with his friend and said our hellos. They both seemed so excited about the club, and Charlie was full of compliments all around. The club didn't have a line out the door, which looked a mile long coming in. Oh, it did have a mile long out the door, which looked coming in. Luckily, we didn't have to use the front door. Charlie returned from the bar with two giant Long Island iced teas, which were his favorite drink to start with. And then we just sat for a while watching people dancing. Occasionally conversing about passing thoughts. We danced for a while, having a few more drinks, and after about 2 hours, Charlie said he was ready to go home. What a daunting time to look forward to. He always liked to have a brief sexual encounter before drifting off to sleep with my naked body entwined between his arms and legs. It was bad enough to have to entertain him at every given second of the day, but his grip on me was so stifling I felt choked. I could hardly breathe, much less sleep. Eventually, my overworked mind would drift in and out of restless sleep, but constantly on edge. I thought many of the nights of escaping, but where would I go? Would one of Ron's ever so connected informants find me and turn me in to him to be disposed of for good? I just prayed that I wouldn't be another missing person to add to the list of girls found in the local ditches. I knew that's where I was headed if I screwed this up for Ron again. As if my guardian angel was there the whole time listening to my secret prayers, my rescue came the next morning with an abrupt bursting through the bedroom door at about 6 a.m. Charlie and I were still lying in bed together, and his grip on me was still tight. The men, dressed in all black military gear, had large guns and helmets on. It was so frightening. At first, I couldn't even comprehend what was happening so rapidly. I thought Charlie couldn't have been in some kind of trouble with a business friend he had done wrong to. But then one of the men in black shouted, FBI, this is a raid. Get down with your hands on your head. In too much shock to move, three of the men grabbed Charlie and threw him to the floor and cuffed him. I sat up in the bed and my sheets covering my naked body and watched as they dragged Charlie from the room. Still completely nude, he wasn't even allowed to get dressed. Another agent had to come back into the room and find him a pair of shorts. I could hear him screaming at the top of the lungs all the way outside. He was screaming, and the last thing I heard him yell was, "If you say anything, you know you will, who will find you?" I could hear more threats being yelled at me, but I couldn't make out what it was he was saying. I was in total confusion and couldn't believe what was happening. There were so many uniformed agents. I felt so small compared to all of them, but they were all very kind and helped me out of the bed, allowing me to remain covered up with the bed sheet so I could get dressed. The first decency I had been shown in a long time. It was an odd feeling to acknowledge. I knew the life I had come accustomed to for the last 6 months was now over. And in so many ways, I was relieved, but was also very nervous about what lay ahead of me. I excused myself to the bathroom to put some clothes on, not having anything half decent like a normal pair of jeans and a t-shirt. The best I could come up with was a metallic blue miniskirt and a tiny matching top that fell just below my breast, hardly clothing at all. It was more like scraps of clothing. Putting my hair up in a tight bun with the scrunchie that held my $500 bill, I was led out of Charlie's townhouse for the very last time. Starting my life over again, I wanted to leave behind my every memory belonging to these horrid times, only taking small sack containing my underwear, makeup bag, and journal with me. The agents led me down the staircase, and my last visions of Charlie was bent over the hood of a police vehicle, still screaming and handcuffed. I slipped into the back seat of the car and was driven to Broward County Police Station, where the federal agents interviewed me about my entire whereabouts for the last 6 months. I was so scared of what Ron would do if I told the agents what really happened. But at the same token, I knew he'd most likely kill me anyway for being such a liability. Over the next few hours, I sat down and told the agents how Ron's business worked and what part I had to play to him. I was able to ask how they found out I was at Charlie's house, and they informed me that I was being followed all the way from Ocala, Florida, where Ron had me stowed away for the last 4 months. TJ, my friend, called my parents after our first phone conversation, and ever since then, the FBI were tapping the phone lines and recording every conversation. Completely unaware of TJ's carrying act of deceit, I was in such shock that they had been tracking us for so long. I knew now, with or without my help, the FBI had enough on Ron to put him away for a very long time if they could catch him, that is. Having so many crooked people working for you, you can be an advantage when you're in trouble. Like having a pair of eyes in every city, Ron was somehow able to find out about Charlie's arrest and immediately deserted the country to avoid legal punishment, not to mention the discreditation of his esteemed clientele that the feds were now on to. Ron had so many countless charges put up against him. Eventually, when the FBI were able to track him down, they were able to have him arrested in Yugoslavia and extradited back to Miami. He was finally held accountable for being a pedophile, soliciting women for prostitution, and running many illegitimate and illegal businesses. By the time the FBI caught him, he was in his mid-70s when he died of old age, serving his second year prison for a lengthy sentence. Okay. because it said he died in a hospital in his obituary. Um, let's see. Coincidentally, I was told of his punishment and death many years later by one of the same FBI agents that had rescued me from Charlie's arms. I was taken out of the interrogation room after the interview was over with and told to sit at one of the officers' desks while I was waiting for someone to pick me up. Uncertain of who that someone would be, I assumed it would be someone from the juvenile delinquents division to take me back to some state-operated lockdown facility. Not the nicest of places to call home, but I had no choice in this matter. Sitting back in the revolving chair, I was twirling out of boredom and listening to the roaming conversation within the office. This, I think, is kind of a weird reaction out of boredom. Most people would be pretty scared and pretty lost. I pondered in fearful anticipation of the dreadful places that lay in store for me, having to have spent a lot of my adolescence in these kind of places for the sheer factor that my mother said I was out of control and unable to handle by 11 years old. There was plenty of just reason for me to be so scared of those places. What I knew lay in store for me were constant fights between the rough girls being settled with violent raids. Then out came the pepper spray, and then the strip searches, and worst of all, no sunlight. It didn't matter if you were a quiet, shy girl that didn't belong there. When there was a fight, which was could be like a few times a week, every person in the room was considered a threat and were treated like a violent criminal. I hated those places and the memories they gave me. That's why I always end up back on the streets. No child or even a juvenile should have to be subjected to such unreasonable force and neglect. Some of the girls were so used to being subdued to this kind of treatment. Their their whole life, they ended up repeating the same attributes as the people who initially hurt them in the first place. One very sad girl, I'll never forget her, had a father who had been a heroin junkie and decided to play Russian roulette with some of his addict friends, and by fate or chance, took the bullet straight through his brain, killing him instantly. Her mother, being a heroin addict herself, spiraled downwards after his death and gave her 4-year-old child to her aging grandmother that eventually had to put my 12-year-old friend in this undire circumstances. I can only have the highest hopes for her today, but unfortunately for most girls that have been victimized by society aren't able to ever stop being a victim for the rest of their lives or go on to make other people victims themselves. A sad and unfortunate fate for so many innocent, and it happens so much more than anyone would rather admit to instead of just trying to find a solution. Okay, so I'll end it there. Um, then in the next uh, part, I'll cover when she goes back to her parents. Well, for her father shows up, she gets sent to juvie, and then she does end up going back to her parents because she runs away again. So I'll get into that the next time. But yeah, this is, yes, she was a victim and she was re-victimized horribly. Uh, you know, She made many, many bad decisions. Again, it doesn't justify her lies and attacking Prince Andrew and trying to destroy somebody. So we're obviously seeing how she's despising men, how she's being groomed to despise men. I mean, that I guess would be a pretty normal and reaction. I think most people could appreciate. So, yeah, this is just very, very sad all the way around. But this is what I've been beating my head up against a wall on these issues. We've got to clean up family courts. We've got to clean up child protection services. As she says, no child should be forced to endure the kind of treatment, particularly these kids, the runaway kids, are coming from problem homes. Don't stick them in a place where it's just gonna keep on, if not get worse. So it's very sad. Yeah, I,